Hey, what's up, guys? This is Bax for the Front Row at the Freak Show YouTube channel. Going to talk about the Baxstage Pass I wrote for the June 22nd, episode 17 of Front Row at the Freak Show. Hidden in many news stories are tiny pieces of reality that are glossed over if ever mentioned at all. These days, one could feel sorry for the lack of coverage on the ever-expanding Kardashian ass as she tries to keep up with her dad, mom. Anyway, I hear less about equality when it comes to gender identity and more about the Vanity Fair cover Caitlyn has airbrushed across. Doesn't that sum it all up? On the cover of a magazine dedicated to vanity. What about the rights of all those confused children, preteens, adults that can't and likely never will be able to afford a new hole or select a wiener size? I'll have the Boogie Nights, please. We all know that wasn't real, Wahlberg. Instead of anyone using the unearned notoriety to further gender equality when it comes to identity, you could type in Bruce or Caitlyn Jenner as I did today, and you'll see what comes up. Father's Day tweets sent by the family, and whether those were hurtful or sweet, and that all depends on what news source you're checking out. Look at the other major news stories across the front page of your chosen browser on any given day. Most of these are a reflection of what our pop culture is spewing out of both ends, but there's very little about issues such as war or growing debt, maybe even the TPP that is threatening our workers in many ways. I won't get into those now, but you don't hear about these things. You don't hear about the job losses due to technology. What about things in the future like delivery drivers being replaced with drones, taxis with self-driving cars? Are these things far-fetched? Maybe, but I'd ask you to look at your local Walmart as an example of our future, both on the corporate level and the personal one. Aside from things like the site People of Walmart, which can oftentimes give an alarmingly accurate cross-section of our culture, there are things about this company that have set up a model for the direction of our country in several ways. Way up at the top of the Fortune 500 list sits Wally World, glaring down at you and daring you to shop elsewhere, evidenced by things like their savings catcher that has an app that makes you just sit on your couch and scan your receipt, and that way you can get money back based on competitors' pricing. Walmart has monopolized your patronage. 1/3 of the U.S. are Walmart shoppers. That's 100 million people per week. When you have limited options, your choices are dictated by default. 90% of Americans live no further than 15 miles from a Walmart on average. We could experience a very real catastrophe soon. The Waltons obviously believe it since they built a massive bunker under their home after 9/11. Some other indicators of the corporate model future are the import of 80% of their merchandise from China. You may also be interested to know that the customer base is drawn from Americans making $40,000 or less per year. You can check out these stats and some other ones on businesspundit.com. There's some very interesting things. They draw it from the Walmart website and PBS and some other fairly reputable places. So it's an accurate depiction of Walmart. You should check it out. But what can this show us? With the middle class shrinking, it makes a good case for the corporate model for all businesses. It's important to talk about corporations and why they exist, and that's for the sole purpose of finding ways to further exploit labor and accumulate capital. That's what they do. Left unchecked, corporations and companies will expand at all opportunities presented. When a company or corporation becomes complacent, they also become stagnant, and they also become food for the other larger corporations and are consumed by them. This is often the fate of most private businesses, whether they are stagnant or not. You can't keep up with Walmart. When you buy 1 billion dingle hoppers, then you have the dingle hopper industry cornered. Other people can't afford to buy dingle hoppers and sell them to make a profit if Walmart has bought all the dingle hoppers up, and that is the way that things are going. Walmart is just growing and increasing and rampantly driving the market in so many areas. Companies will go with what works, so many of them, if not all, will follow Walmart like a greasy and uncaring rodent follows the Pied Piper, to circle the American people and leave them with little choice but to follow suit. How many times have you been to a Walmart and used the automated checkout? They may be irritating, but they only have to work well enough to replace a person. So if you don't think that fast food restaurants and other businesses won't follow, you're wrong. Machines do not need a smoke break, and they don't need to step out to talk to their baby mama, and they don't chew gum in customers' faces. Look at the armies of lawyers, especially the young lawyers, interns and paralegals who used to comb through thousands of files and documents and do research, who have all been replaced by software who does it in a fraction of the time. And it doesn't need a smoke break or coffee break or a Christmas card. Our futures are not set in stone, and these corporations, companies may not all follow suit like Walmart, but you have to remember that these large corporations don't have a heart, and they don't care about the American people. For the most part, they all care about the bottom line, and that's it. I would argue that Vanity Fair could give a damn what's between a Jenner's legs, but that's what sells, so it gets slapped on the front page. Speaking of slapped all over the front page, racism is always going to be a problem. I don't think it'll ever go away. But you know what? Neither will stupidity. And you can't fight stupid because the only cure is education, and that takes time. I would encourage everyone to take a step back and read about all these stories that you're hearing about and look for other sources, be it the internet or a library. They still have those. Because the media has an agenda. So do corporations, and so do governments. And that is control. Control the information, and you can dictate how people see the world. Look, if everyone's made to look angry because they are racist, then no one wonders if they're angry because being poor has anything to do with it, or any other problems for that matter. Look, just because you see all black people on a story in the news rioting, doesn't mean that those were the only people out there rioting. And it doesn't mean that they're all mad over racism. They could be mad over other things like abuse and unfair treatment. And there are plenty of other minority groups and white people out there, I assure you. Just because you see all black people out there, or all Mexicans, or all white people, it doesn't mean that those are the only people out there. Just because they tell you that racism is the problem and the driving force doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. It doesn't mean that it's not, but it's up to you to research this, to look at all of the contributing factors and determine for yourself what the real problem is. I don't allow my kids to watch every channel, okay? But that doesn't mean that other channels don't exist. It simply means that I hold the power to dictate what they see and most of what they hear. There isn't a conspiracy behind every news story, but that doesn't mean that there are no conspiracies. We have to keep the open dialogue and remember that it is okay to question everything. Look, every Halloween, the kids go out, they dress up, and inevitably they'll get that weird candy in the black wrappers and the orange wrappers that nobody eats. They don't eat them, but they're there. There's always somebody handing out the garbage with the good stuff, and it's our job to try and be responsible and throw out the crap that is sold and pushed along with the good stuff, or the truth, as it were. I'll leave you with this at the end, and it's related in a way, but I simply like the quote. So, Congressman Alan Grayson said, quote, "It's ironic that the government thinks it's all right to have a record of every single call an American makes, but not all right for an American citizen to know what sovereign rights the government is negotiating away. Having seen what I've seen, I would characterize it as a punch in the face to the middle class of America, but I'm not allowed to tell you why." End quote. I hope you've enjoyed this Backstage Pass. I am Bax, coming in for Crafty and the Atomizer on Front Row at the Freak Show. Check out our site